Welcome back to the What You More podcast. I'm your host, Quinton Harris, as we're dialed into episode 157, the second part of this economic outlook. And we're going to take a deep dive into Jacksonville. So this is for all my real estate partners, all mortgage lenders. A bulk of our audience do live here in Jacksonville. This episode's for you. But if you don't live in Jacksonville and you're interested in hearing about comparisons to your local market, I'm going to dive into other markets on this with comparisons of Jacksonville to other local Florida markets, as well as larger metropolitans outside of the state of Florida. So again, you may not live in Jacksonville, but you may go, wait a minute, I hear that he's comparing this to Austin, or he's comparing this to San Antonio or New York. I'm going to have a lot of data about people relocating to the state of Florida, Jacksonville specifically, from other states and why. And then also wrapping up this episode with the infamous BTRs, what the builders are doing with builder rents and what markets are leading the way in that. So guys, I hope you enjoy this. And here we are for part two. So when I talk about Jacksonville, just like I did on the last episode, that is going to be the 5 counties here in Jacksonville. Our MSA is 1.71 million. It's the 39th largest city in the United States and the 4th largest in the state of Florida. So let's take a look at the Jacksonville housing market. Let's take a look at this demand and supply curve that is happening. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I get asked all the time, how much higher can we go in Jacksonville? Are we in a housing bubble? And as I stated in the last episode, we are not by any means in a housing bubble, no matter what the social media campaigns or YouTubers want you to hear. It's not the case. And, you know, I know I don't want to say wishful thinking, but what I think we have is I think we have a group of very frustrated, how can I say it, buyers that have a little bit of anger towards the market because either A, we weren't able to get a home based on affordability in the 2020, 2021 era. B, you weren't of age and now you are, and you're kind of pissed off you can't buy a home because of interest rates or housing prices. Or C, you're stuck in a home and you want to go to another home, but the price point is too high and you're locked into a current interest rate. So the only answer to all three of those situations that I see on YouTube is it must be a housing bubble. Housing's just going to crash. And when it does, I can get what I want. And it's not going to work like that. You know, and for the people that are saying that, I have people go, oh, this guy was he even around in 08? Yeah, I was around in 08. Matter of fact, I've been doing this for 23 years. Not only was I around in 08, I lived through it. And I lived through it in real estate. Still have the financial scars all over me that I look at every day to remind me of that. But I can tell you this, there's a fundamental difference in 08 versus right now. And that fundamental difference is we were way oversupplied and very under demand. The other fundamental difference is that the average equity position of a homeowner in 2008 was upside down. So you had homeowners that didn't want to continue to pay on their homes because their equity position was upside down. And you had banks that couldn't work with every buyer to get that loan modified or even the balance of the loan modified. So they were resorting to short sales and foreclosures. That's a fundamental difference because people were taking their keys and just throwing them back to the bank and going, screw it, I don't want this house. I owe way more on it than it's worth, and I'm never going to get out of this. There was that very nearsightedness in the market, which we all felt. We all saw it. So what did they do? They moved out of their homes and they sold it off piece by piece. You literally had palm trees sold out. AC units were sold. Fixtures were sold. I mean, people were terrorizing the homes and selling them off part by part. And then they would go rent a home that they would live in. And what I'm getting at is they didn't take care of the home because they let it become a short sale or a foreclosure. And this was very rampant in a lot of markets. Well, in today's market, here's an issue. There's nowhere to live. There's not a lot of places to go rent. People are not throwing their keys back to the bank because they have an equity position. And not only do they have equity, they have a substantial equity position. And we're going to show you some of those equity positions. And as I mentioned in the last episode, the average homeowner in Jacksonville has 6 figures of equity position. So they're not throwing their keys back to the bank saying, hey, here's a foreclosure. And that's why housing is not going to crash. It would take foreclosures for a market to crash to deteriorate values. And we literally are up 0.08 on foreclosures. Let that sit in for a minute. 0.08. So this is not a foreclosure-ism. This is not a 2008 moment. We are not oversupplied. We are undersupplied and a tremendous amount of demand, which we're going to show you right now in this presentation. So I have some slides. If you want a copy of these slides, you can get the whole slide deck at What's Your One More on our YouTube channel. That's at What's Your One More on our YouTube channel. All you have to do is subscribe, and the slides are yours. So look forward to sharing those with you guys. And if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. So let's jump right into it. So one of the ways, and there's many ways, but one of the ways we measure demand is through pending sales, right? Because pending sales tells us future closings because they're under contract. So what we did was go back to 2018, because in my last episode, I talked about normal. In my eyes, normal was 2018 of a market cycle. Chaos is the fourth cycle, which before you get back to normal. I think chaos was, 2021 fourth quarter, and then, then consolidation starts to happen before you get back to normal. Consolidation, we're in that cycle still. And the good news is, as we proceed from consolidation, we head into normal. So we're almost there. But what I want to do is, what's up with our demand? So I took average pending listings over every single year, and I said, what's a 12-month running average from 18 all the way through Q1 24? You'll see on the slide, one of the things that jumps off the page to me, back to my original, thought, is that we're very close to the 2018 pending sales, very close. And you'll see on this graph how close we are. What's interesting to me is that the interest rate in 2018 was 4.5. The interest rate right now, 7.25 plus. I mean, we're doing this with higher interest rates. Well, the flaw that you hear online is that there's an affordability issue. The flaw that you hear online is the housing crash is going to happen. But yet with the highest rates we've seen in 30 years, we still are on track to outpace 2018. And we haven't even hit the summer months yet. As I'm making this podcast, we're just now in Q2. Imagine what the money months look like. And I call them that because that's when the most money moves. April, May, June, July, August. That is when you see the bulk of real estate take place. So I'll be very interested to see by the time we get through mid Q3 what these numbers look like. But we're doing this with these high of interest rates. Could you imagine if we had 4.5 interest rates, what we would look like? Yeah, we'd be doing some serious transactions, and not just what we're doing right now. The other thing that matches demand is we look at the amount of listings sold, and we go all the way back, same thing, 2018 moving forward, put all of the amount of sold listings on here. Now, this goes for every kind of property, right? Every property type sold listings. And again, we're on track for 2018 with those same interest rates. To me, that's pretty impressive and speaks to the demand, because if the demand was leaving the market, we would see both of those numbers coming down, especially with higher interest rates than what we have now. The next slide I want to take a look at is cash buyers to the market. Now, as I was making this slide deck, I was joking with my co-host, Daniel Halverson. I go, what do you think about this cash slide here on demand? And I'll explain in a minute why that shows demand. Daniel goes, why in the heck do real estate agents care about how much cash is in the market? I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? That's like their favorite type of loan to do. It's cash, man. They don't have to involve us. You and I don't like cash, right? That's our biggest competitor. If you're a mortgage lender, cash is your biggest competitor. But if you're not a mortgage lender, hey, cash is king, man. You want that transaction. So I show this because Q1 is higher than 2018. It's higher than 2019, Q1 of 24. It's higher than 2023. Think about that. So we have more cash buyers in the market right now. Now, I would argue that luxury is leading the way, but this is a percentage, not a total amount. So what's interesting about this number is this. Cash typically goes where the return is. So you could argue this is made up of investors, luxury home buyers, but some of this is from the wins in the stock market coming into real estate. But cash would be deteriorating in our market significantly if they didn't think there was a rate of return on the real estate, thus also showing further demand. This is another measurement of demand we look at here. So then I turn to the supply side, right? Because we clearly show where the demand is in the numbers. I'm getting ready to show you where the demand is in the population. But before we do that, I want to focus on the supply. That's that second part of the economic formula there. So on the supply side, why is the supply significantly lower? And then also, why are the price points going up? I want to show you some things here because the news has some misleading headlines on here, and I want to show you how they can do that and why that doesn't always match up. So on this graph, you'll see these blue bars. These blue bars represent, from 2018 moving forward, the total average price point of every home sold here in Jacksonville. And then what I did was I stripped out the single-family residence homes. So I took out everything from townhomes to condos, manufactured homes, commercial properties, took them all out, right? And I just put an orange trend line for single-family because I want to measure how high has single-family homes gotten and then how much higher can they go? Because we get asked that question all the time. This is kind of also negating the whole bubble idea. So when I take a look at this, what you'll find is that the single-family home price is significantly rising, and it's rising at a higher pattern than the gross amount of all the sales. And when I take a look at February, that's February 24, the average sales price was just roughly $488,000. Well, earlier in the fourth quarter of 23, we peaked at $517,000. And when I take a look at that, a news headline would say, oh, Jacksonville home prices are down since Q4 going into Q2 of 24 from 23. But here's a very important statistic. There's seasonality that takes place in every real estate market, right? As soon as you come out of the Santa slump and you get into the spring, the spring sales, if you may, price points go back up. And so But what happens is if they hit a new height and they come down a little bit into that, that January, February slump, that Santa slump, next thing you know, there's a new spring sell that takes place and new heights are created. And I want to show you this in a graph that we're about to pull up. But here's something that I love that gets missed in those news headlines. If we are at 488,000 now in February of 24, in February of 23, we were 448,000. That's a 9% increase, 8.9% increase from February of 23 to February of 24, measuring the seasonalities in the right era, not month to month, quarter to quarter. That's really important. And that gets lost in a lot of those news headlines. That's a 9% increase. I mean, would you like a 9% increase? I would. So I'm going to show you some other things on here. When we take a look at the amount of inventory, right? And this is why I think you're seeing these price points move up on single family homes. The amount of inventory in this slide shows that when you remove the single family inventory from the total amount of active inventory, in February and March, we're at the same total amount of single family homes that we were in June of 2020. Like, let that sit in for a minute. A lot of people, when I present that to them, go, what? Yeah, we have the same amount of single-family homes on the market that we did in June of 2020. That's one of the major reasons we have so much lack of inventory is because we're running at the same rate we were in 2020. And a lot of people don't recognize that. That's because there's so many condos coming to the market right now in Jacksonville because of let's call it the Miami law, if you may, because of what happened with the condos down in Miami that collapsed. There were a lot more government regulations put on structural foundations and engineering certifications that have to be done. And then all of the up-to-date prep work that has to happen, that the HOA dues are just getting completely altered from what they were to these much higher prices. So between now and 25, you're seeing more condos come to the market because homeowners are wanting to get out of that. And they may sit there. They could create this stale inventory. I don't know. But I will say this, the single family homes are the beneficiary of this because there's not a limited supply and the price points keep going up month by month, year over year on that. And when you look at the seasonality trend, this is one of my favorite graphs, this one and the one right behind it. You'll see I have these 2014 all the way to 2024, 10-year history on here. And what you'll see is that every single March to June, you go up. Every single one of them. I mean, it doesn't stop. It's like clockwork. And that's that seasonality we talk about. And you'll see the red arrows pointing and showing you this trajectory. It's literally so predictable that it's scary. But this is a 10-year seasonality trend. It's been this way. I could go back 30 years. It's going to look like this, right? I just couldn't fit it on the graph. But what I'm getting at is this. Did you know someone in 21 that was like, man, I feel like I'm paying too much for a home, or I'm not going to pay that for that home. I mean, what's interesting is if you look in May of 21 at the peak, May and June of 21, there's a peak in there of that year. They may have felt like they were buying at the top of the market. But look at that same month a year later. That's a significant increase. You think that person was mad then? Nope. They're actually pretty happy. You had another increase in 23. It wasn't significant because of the rate hike, but you had an increase. And you're looking to have another one here in this spring cycle. And so my point with a buyer is this, is that when it comes to single family homes, the competition is there. The demand is there. The supply is not there. It is limited. So it's very hard to go in and negotiate right now or have a mindset to negotiate that I'm really going to get a deal on this home. And that's because the inventory is low and you're entering a cycle of seasonality right now where you're going to have more uptick in buyers too, which means more uptick in transactions. Because this next slide shows you how many transactions take place in those same peaks, those same seasonality runs. And you'll see the arrows. It's like clockwork. That month of May, June, or even July are the highest amount of transaction months that take place every single year. That's seasonality. And you have more buyers in the market, thus more competition, more multiple offers. If you're a real estate agent, listen to this. How many multiple offers are you hearing in your market or have in your pipeline? When I polled the audience, about 35% of the audience was dealing with multiple offers at that time. And we're just now hitting the seasonality. We're just now there. And it was mid-April. Imagine what this looks like come May in these peak months. It's probably going to be 80% of the room dealing with it. And when you have multiple offers, what happens to the price points? They typically go up because of the competition driving that price point. Well, that's with 7.25% interest rates. What happens when those rates come down? Just a little bit. Those prices are going to go up just a little bit. That's how that works. And so that's the supply issue. The demand, we showed what's taking place in the form of pending sales, sold properties, and investors in the market. But what else adds to that demand? So when we talk about affordability in any market, not just Jacksonville, there's three things that make up affordability. The price of the item, in this case, the home, the rate in which you finance that item, which is the home, and then the amount of household income that you make, right? And of those three pieces of the puzzle, the most stubborn, the one that doesn't move the fastest, is going to be household income. That's really important because you can't go to your boss and go, hey, I need you to pay me more because I need to go buy a house that costs more. It doesn't work like that, right? So that's the one that's the most stubborn in that equation. Well, the other issue that we're having in our market in particular, but this is also a nationwide trend that we're seeing, is the 90s babies that are making an impact. Now, I've talked about this in the past, but we are now in the thick of it. You know, the first-time home buyer is set to be 33 years old, somewhere between 32 and 33. I actually saw a recent report where that jumped to 35. I was kind of shocked, but let's go with 32, 33, 34, or 35, right? Let's just say those 4 years in there. If I go back 33 years from today's date, that's 1991. Well, if you look at this graph that I'm showing you, you see the 1991 year birth rate and how many more people of population that added to the birth rate. And then you look at 92 and you look at 93 and you look at 94, right? That circle, those are the three highest birth years of record population-wise on record. And then it shows all the generations on here. And what you're finding is this, that the millennials of that year, they're deemed millennials, the way they're coming to the market, if you just add up the population, I mean, each year, that is going to be roughly 25 million, somewhere between 22 and 25 million more people turning of 32 to 33 to 34 to 35 years old over the next 4 years. That is a significant amount of more buyers wanting to buy a new home coming to the market. And the challenge with that is we just talked about the limited supply in our market. There are many markets that look like that. There are some other ones that don't, right? I get it. Not all markets are created the same. But in our market in particular, if you're an agent here in Northeast Florida, you have to be saying, wow, like that's a big deal. And one of the things is our population has grown significantly in that millennial market as well. So speaking of population growth, let's take a look at this. Here is something from the Florida Demographic Estimating Conference in conjunction with the University of Florida, where they've shown population growth estimates through 2050. Now, 2050 is a long way away. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm saying they're pretty consistent with what they've done in the past. And here's what I'm looking at. We're at 171 million in population right now. By the end of 25, they have us at 1771. By the end of 2035, they have us over 2 million. That's 11 years away, over 2 million in population just in Jacksonville. That's almost a 300,000 growth rate, 300,000 person growth rate. Where are those people going to live in that population demand with a housing market that looks like this? So it bodes a lot of questions that need to be answered there, but that's more demand coming to the market. And I think that's really important because, that shows this buyer pool that continues to expand and not constrict. Going back to 2008, you had a buyer pool that was constricting. It was shrinking by the day. And you had a seller pool that was growing very quickly. And that gave you an imbalanced market, which led to the failure of this, basically of real estate during that time, right? Well, now you have a market where demand is growing and supply continues to be restrictive. That is going to cause price points to go up. That's not going to cause them to collapse, right? So the other challenge we have in our market, both good and bad, right? I'd say it's a challenge, is we are the #1 net migration city in America again for the second year in a row. And we join the ranks of San Antonio, Tampa, Charlotte, Raleigh, Austin, Nashville, Dallas, Oklahoma City, and Orlando. Now, net migration means the amount of people moving in versus how many moved out. That's a net number. So that total net number, that puts us at the #1 spot 2 years in a row now. And Jacksonville's been in this top ranking since 2016. This is adding more population and more buyers to our market. Again, if we had people exiting our city and our population was coming down, well, you could take the buyer pool and say we're starting to shrink it a little bit, but we're not doing that. We're actually growing it leaps and bounds. So where are they moving from? Well, this is a relocation trend that we have. It's a heat map. And the way we get this data is, from the Bank of England. And I think this is the Bank of England mortgage is really important because the most accurate way you could possibly get this without having application data is you would go to the post office service, the USPS. Well, they're 2 years behind in their data. So if you went there today, you're only going to get maybe 2022 data. You're not going to get anything from 23, definitely nothing from 24. So van lines and, U-Haul, they publish where they take loads from and to, right? So you could assume that people are moving to an area based on that, but that's also a year behind. So this is the most accurate information that we can get at the fastest rate rate. So what we did was we took all of the applications from 2017 moving forward, and we only looked at a couple things inside there. We looked at where are you moving from, right? So we're looking at your subject property. And then are you taking an application here in Jacksonville, Florida, looking to buy, right? And so that tells us an idea of where people are moving from. So the top 5 areas people are moving into Jacksonville from. Number 1, Atlanta, Georgia. Number 2, California. Number 3, New York. Number 4, New Jersey. Number 5, Washington, D.C. area. Now, to me, I believe, I could be wrong here, but I think all of those have some sort of state income tax. So that naturally makes Florida an attractive place. And then I think our homestead tax situation that they do for properties down here is also very attractive, right? Our homeowners insurance, not so much. We've talked about that. That's probably the trade-off as you move down here, and you find that out when you get here. But those are very large states with large populations where people are moving down to Florida. The only reason I said Atlanta, Georgia is because it's specifically in Atlanta. It's not all of Georgia, whereas California, it's all over the place. So I wanted to kind of dial that in there. But why are they moving here? Well, one of the things we've seen on here is that, from a source of Money Geek, that Jacksonville is ranked number 3 for job seekers in the United States. Number 3. Like, we have not seen that before in our city. And it's based on job growth and wage growth. We definitely have not seen that last part in Jacksonville show up on a map yet. Wage growth is something we have really not been able to ascertain. I don't want to say track. We always ask ourselves, where are the big jobs going to come from, and when are they going to get to Jacksonville? Because if we want these house prices to continue and stabilize, we have to support that with household income. That's part of that affordability I talked about. Well, for the first time, really, since I've been doing this, we're seeing the professional and business services, which represent high 6-figure paying jobs, making their way to Jacksonville. Matter of fact, they're making their way to Jacksonville to the tune of a plus 2,800 from 23 to 24. February of 23 to February 24, the BLS is reporting 2,800 of those have made their way to Jacksonville. Leading the way is health and education services, and then trade, transportation, utilities. That's very, everyone's expect that in Jacksonville. We have CSX here. You have JEA here. The list goes on. That's a rather large area in the military as well. Then the financial sector services. So that's big for us. You have to have high-paying jobs if the home prices are going up at this rate, and we appear to have that, which is why you could say from 2020 all the way to 23, you've had a 25% increase in the median income in Jacksonville. As we kind of start to wrap up some of these slides here, one of the things I wanted to point out when we look at our neighbors, Orlando and Tampa to Jacksonville, that's kind of like our big metropolitan neighbors we compare ourselves to. We always want to measure, like, what does our house price point look like to them? And then what does our household income look like to them? And when we measure household income and we measure mortgage payments, we come up with what we call a household income ratio, right? So let's just say if my household income is $10,000 and my mortgage payment all in is $3,000, that's a 30% housing ratio, if that makes sense to the audience. In this graph, what you'll see is amongst those two cities, Tampa and Orlando, Jacksonville is drastically below them in affordability, meaning we have a much higher opportunity here. Lower affordability means we have higher paying jobs, and also we have lower price points as far as mortgage payments. Now, you could argue that, wait a minute, if you look at the statistics, Orlando to Jacksonville has higher price points. We do. That's correct. But what this graph is telling me is that we also are getting higher paying jobs in Orlando. That's big. We have not seen that before. And that trend really kind of corrected and reversed itself about that time those net migration stats started coming in 2016. You start to see that reversal happen there. And I thought that was really interesting because, again, we haven't seen that. As we go to wrap up here, one of the things I wanted to talk about was, hey, this limited inventory, right? With the amount of limited inventory, where is everyone going to live? Or is it going to be apartments? Because we do see apartments being built. Is it going to be multifamily, which is a form of apartments, but also other types of multifamily? Or is it going to be some of these builders doing the BTRs, which are built to rents? And as I leave you with this slide on here, this is not a threat to real estate agents. I want to make sure you understand that, nor is it to mortgage lenders. It's more of a solution to some of the challenges of people moving here and where they're going to live. And so one of the things Zonda kind of showed us was some of the build to rent markets in Jacksonville's currently in the top 3 for total units under construction and active BTRs. BTRs could be multifamily, so it could be apartments, but it also could be whole communities where builders are building single-family residences with the intent of renting them. And we're starting to see that in certain areas of Jacksonville, and more builders turn towards that as these higher interest rates still play a role in the market, because this is a more affordable product that they can build quicker, faster, and really provide necessity in the form of housing here in the Jacksonville area. So it's an interesting concept. We're going to continue to watch it, but it's proven in other markets right now, and that's why you're starting to see it come here. And it could be seen in your markets. I mean, we'll just rattle off the top 20 here. We got Phoenix, Scottsdale, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Austin, Tampa, Northport, Sarasota, Orlando, Boise City, Savannah, Salt Lake City, Lakeland, Las Vegas, and Riverside, San Bernardino. These are relatively large markets, and you're starting to see it be functional. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see more and more of it come online here in due time to help satisfy, again, that appetite for demand and housing supply that's out there. So guys, if you like what you're hearing, please 5-star review this podcast. Again, all of these slides from both episodes will be on our YouTube channel at What's Your One More. That's at What's Your One More with the number 1. Hit subscribe. The slide deck will be on there. Feel free to use these. All I ask is that you give credit and source to the people that made these slides, which are going to be Bank of England, One More, and then all of our partners associated from Zonda to MBS Highway on this as well. So guys, thank you for your time on this today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please hit us up here. Until then, we'll see you the next episode of What's Your One More.
I got one more shot, I'm gonna make it. One more chance, I'm gonna take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life.